Hey, we got another story for you. This one is a follower submission, and it is titled, Am I the Astronaut for Poisoning the Cake and the Guests at My Daughter-in-Law's Party and Not Admitting to It? Can we just go ahead and start with this before we even start reading the story? I, 63 female, have always been the designated cake baker in our family. I use a very old and secret family recipe for chocolate cake that has been handed down through my family for generations. I bake it for every family gathering. It's tradition. This year for my daughter-in-law's, let's call her D, 35th birthday party, I offered as usual to make my chocolate cake. D said she would be perfectly happy purchasing a cake, as she intended to invite several of her friends and would eat a larger cake than I usually make for our small family. She did not want to put me out, and I appreciate that. But I do love to bake, so I said I would just double the recipe and everything would be fine. I insisted. Fast forward to the day before the party, I always bake my cake a full 24 hours before serving and refrigerate it overnight. I had doubled the recipe just as I had planned, but I used a sheet pan to make a double layered cake, and I did not take into account the amount of surface area, so I ended up short on frosting. That meant I needed more chocolate, which I did not have time to go to the store to purchase since I needed to go get the cake into the refrigerator as soon as possible. My son and daughter live just 2 blocks away and have 2 children, so I thought that they might have some chocolate at their house. They were both at work, so I quickly ran into their house, grabbed 2 chocolate bars out of the pantry, and returned to finish my cake. The next evening at the party, everything was going as planned. My cake turned out beautifully and it was a hit with everyone, until about an hour after we cut into it. A few of the party guests started to mention that they were feeling funny. Everyone just assumed that something on the menu did not agree with them and continued the festivities. But as the evening went on, more and more of Dee's friends began to complain of lightheadedness, fogginess, and disorientation. Soon, everyone was comparing what they'd eaten, trying to narrow down the food item that was to blame. Ultimately, most of the guests ended up leaving early, and Dee was very upset that her party had ended badly. Ultimately, it came down to my cake and one other dish that must have been the problem. I did not believe for 1 second that it could have been my cake that poisoned the guest, because I just baked it just the same way I always do and have never had any problems. But then I remembered we borrowed chocolate bars. Maybe they were expired. I did not mention to anyone that I had done anything different to my cake. Instead, I waited until after the party, and when I had returned home that evening, I immediately dug into the trash can and pulled out the candy bar wrappers and was absolutely horrified when I did. The candy bars both contain 100 milligrams of THC. I had poisoned Dee's entire party. Wait, so were they poisoned or were they just really high? I was so humiliated that I still, almost 2 weeks later, have not told a single soul what I did. Fortunately, since my cake was one of the 2 suspected culprits, was sent home with me, and I was able to dispose of it before poisoning anyone else. However, I believe that it will only be a matter of time before my son and Dee discover the missing chocolate bars and figure out what I did. So, am I the astronaut for accidentally poisoning my daughter-in-law's cake and not admitting to it? There is a level of inebriation, I guess you can get to, where you feel sick and you might puke, and there is such a thing as too high. It was an accident, right? So we have to take that into consideration. It was an accident. However, once OP discovered what they had done and didn't tell anybody, does that make them the asshole? I mean, you're not going to undo it, and it was an honest mistake. Would everybody believe that was an honest mistake? The question is, am I the astronaut for poisoning the cake and the guest at my daughter-in-law's party and not admitting to it? The act was an innocent mistake. Question should probably be, am I the astronaut for not admitting to poisoning the cake and the guests at my daughter-in-law's party once I discovered that I had? Some shit like that. I mean, you would probably have a lot of people overreact about the discovery that it had happened, right? So in this case, I think it's the not telling that does make OP an asshole here. It was an honest mistake, but once you discover the honest mistake, there has to be some kind of coming clean for it, because there are a lot of risks involved. I mean, if someone was violently ill enough to take themselves to the hospital because they don't know what the hell is going on, that information would be useful to a physician or to them as they try to get things remedied here. So where does this put them on the ASCON scale? Is it 4? You could have done it differently. Is it 3? You should have done that differently. 2? You definitely shouldn't have done that. Or 1, you're a terrible human. We could take 1 off the table because, well, shit, can we? It was an honest mistake, but that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about not telling people once they figured it out. And again, I don't think it's an evil, nefarious, malicious thing because it wasn't intentional. I don't think it gets to 1 territory. I really don't. It's a definitely shouldn't have done that, though. You definitely should have told them once you figured out what it was, and, come what may. It's the truth, at least, and then people who need to know. And if you're telling them that it was a mistake, then you can't do anything to change that. You can own up to it. At this party, everybody's violently ill, right? Everybody's violently ill, except for OP, which means what? OP's got a tolerance, which means the OP didn't notice the difference because they're like, what? I do this every night. No change for me. Why do you think I'm so good at making chocolate cakes? Okay, we'll make it official. NTA for the incident for not telling everybody. ASCON 2. Also, if you could save a slice of that cake, we'd greatly appreciate it.